We love attention. From the very moment we are born, we naturally want to receive as much attention from our parents as possible. And when we grow up, that feeling doesn't go away. We still need attention, but not attention that doesn't matter and attention for no reason at all. We need attention because we're mistreated, used, and bamboozled by the clan sitting in higher power. We need to show the clan who's boss, because according to all democratic standards, the state is to be ruled by the voice of the people, and therefore our voice of revolting cannot be taken away from us. If protesting restrictions were to become tighter, we need to protest because history tells us that such actions from the state will lead to calamity amongst the society. After all, we own the land, we worked hard for it, and now we need to show those handshakers who's boss. George Washington wrote in the American Constitution, consisting of many articles, letters, sections, and amendments. Even he agreed that the right of protest cannot be taken away from us, as that will remove our freedom of speech, and as the article is called, freedom of assembly. George Washington said in the American Constitution, Article 11, "Everyone has the right to freedom of peaceful assembly and to freedom of association with others, including the right to form and to join trade unions for the protection of his interests." This clearly shows that the very basis of a democratic government is the freedom to assemble and do whatever we desire unless it poses a threat to health or crime. The right for us to protest is embedded in the very principles of democracy written by George Washington. But we live in Australia, not America. Why the heck should we care about what Washington said and what they do in Trumpland? You should care because the same democratic principles apply to us. We are a democratic country and are based on the exact same principles. In Australia, Articles 21 and 22 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights and Article 8 of the International Covenant of Economic, Social and Cultural Rights protect our freedom of assembly and our rights to protest. If the very backbone of democracy allows us to protest and share our voice with the government, we should preserve that right, as many office seekers will try to take that away from us. We live on our land, and each day we work hard for it. Imagine some pig from the office comes along and takes away all that we worked so hard on. This is already a reality in some countries, and even countries that are legally democratic. Take Russia, for example. Recently, a master hacker broke into a guy named Navalny's bank accounts and took away all his and his entire family's money. He even took away his 11-year-old savings he had been saving up for a new computer. All of this just because Navalny proved the corruption of elections and formed a nationwide protest and campaign that saw millions come out onto the streets, and their program was so successful they already managed to kick out the mayor of Moscow from his office. But whenever protests happen in that democratic country, so many people are shot and arrested. There's footage on the internet of the police shooting an 80-year-old grandma because she came out onto the streets with her grandchild that day. This is already a reality in countries that are democratic, just like us. We need to protect our right to protest, because if we don't, we will be enslaved and have no way of sharing our values and views with anyone. Do you really want to be like that grandma one day? But you might say, everything is growing great in my country right now. I don't see a reason to protest at all. This is exactly the same thing people in the United States might say at the moment. We in Australia protest for action on climate change. People in France just protest for a new president in general that won't raise their petrol prices. And people in the United States are making fun of Trump. Why do we not protest about issues that really matter right now in the world? Perhaps because we're never told about them. Well, listen up. The United States currently killed over 244,000 civilians, not war soldiers, in their conquest of finding oil in the Middle East. That's not counting the soldiers that were forced and conscripted to fight against their will. That's nearly 250,000 civilians dead. Altogether, these Middle East wars killed over 800,000 people so far. Why is the United States so worried about the health and safety of their people, their children, their soldiers, while they are ready to kill those many parents and even young children just to prove a political point and find oil? There's no reason for the United States to be conquering Iraq, apart from their oil, of course. But what about here in Australia? We always knew those Americans had something wrong with them, but what about us? We don't need to protest, right? Wrong. I can give you some reasons to exit out onto the streets right now. For example, climate change, high taxes compared to other surrounding countries. There are also other, more personal reasons whose opinion may vary from person to person. But I know what you're thinking. No, you don't want to be like a little 5-year-old going out onto the streets for every single tiny problem that arises on our land. But we do need to preserve our right to protest and remind the politicians that the land isn't theirs, it's ours. If the freedom of speech was legal, I would be in prison right now. But it's not. So take a stand outside, breathe in some fresh air, and tell those office tomatoes that you care. It's healthy for you, and what better way to spend the day than to draw attention to yourself from people in charge? We need the right to protest. We need the right to tell the humans in office that we want something done differently. Because we work hard for our land, we care for humanity, and we care for people. Not many people walked out onto the streets to tell Obama that killing 250,000 innocent civilians in Iraq should surely ring a bell. But we should. If we don't protest, that right will eventually get taken away from us, as there are a lot of power-hungry politicians. We need to take a stand, because if we don't, we'll lose power, people will die, and we will live in fear.